Yes, there you
Hey,
are. Hello, Jamal. Hey, how are you?
good. How are you doing?
I'm fine. I'm fine. How are you?
It's it's always interesting here during quarantine. I have three little boys, 6 and 8 years old, so they're homeschooling right in there behind me.
All right.
So they're supposedly in Zoom classes with their teachers, but they're probably goofing around.
But it's working out with the Zoom classes. It's quite different, right? Than to going to school physically.
It's yeah, it's weird, but we're doing kind of like we do some online stuff. And then I just try to get them outside a lot. We're fortunate to be up here in the Sierras. You can see it's like nice, a lot of trees around, and so I just trying to get out on a lot of hikes. We're missing the ocean a lot, but this
Yeah.
is this is the next best thing because where we live in, we're staying at my dad's house because where we live in San Francisco, it's just pretty tight quarters and a lot of stuff's closed, so it's harder to get
Yeah.
outside.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. Cool. Cool.
How are
So
you
how?
holding up? How are you holding up in Berlin?
Yeah, it's fine. I mean, it's summer. Summer's coming up here, so the
Yeah.
weather is quite fine. But you're just allowed to go out with one more person, and no big gatherings in the parks or stuff like that. So I think people are still doing fine, but everything is closed. It feels so strange. Like the cafes are closed, everything where you can go in public is closed. So there's not a lot to do, right? And I mean, the ocean is away anyway, so for us it's not that difficult. But imagine if you're living close by the sea, it must be really hard to see waves pumping and you knowing, oh, I'm not allowed to go in. How are you dealing with that, right?
Yeah, I've been talking with my friend who lives on the beach in Malibu with like a view of the ocean, and the sets have been coming in. It's been good there. And people have been trying boating in. They get fined and taken out, and they've tried everything. But he's always, I'm almost glad that I'm actually San Francisco, where I live, Ocean Beach is still open. You can still
Mhm.
surf.
Ah,
But so my friends are still surfing there, but it's harder with kids to get out to the beach because the beach is one of the few places where that's open, so it's actually kind of crowded. Um, and
oh, but
so
they're still allowed to go into the water?
you can go out in San Francisco at Ocean Beach, which is amazing because San Francisco's done a really good job of quarantining. We've flattened the curve and everything, but
Mhm.
they've kept the beach open. Ocean Beach is huge. It's a 3 mile beach, and the peaks are all along the beach. So yeah, people are still surfing there, and
Wow,
so
at
lucky them.
least. Wow, that's nice.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Are people surfing the rivers at all? Can you go out like,
Oh, I don't know if they're going to the river in Munich, for example.
yeah,
I'm not sure, but I guess they're not, that they shouldn't, or they are not allowed. That's what I
yeah.
know. Yeah. So how do you see this whole pandemic scenario in terms of um, yeah, transformation? Or I mean, you also wrote this book on fear. So if you put this scenario and in the context of your book, what would you say about that?
Well, I think I mean, it's really sad for people who are on the front lines and who are losing loved ones, obviously. But I think for a lot of us, it's an opportunity of pause for one, and to
Mhm.
reflect and go inward. And yeah, I've actually been doing some live readings of the Fear Project to review for myself too. Um, and it's interesting because most of us, even though a lot of us have a lot of anxiety, um, we're pretty much safe in our homes. So what I've been talking about in regard to the Fear Project is how our ancient brain, the amygdala or lizard brain, gets kind of fooled by like watching a
Mhm.
lot of breaking news about the coronavirus. Maybe you see like people dying in a hospital, and you feel your body goes into this red alert mode where you're like, I might get it, or how long will this last? And you go into the future of like, how bad could it get? Worst case scenarios. When in the reality is you're safe at home. Hopefully you have food, shelter, everything you need. And so we've been doing some meditating during those live readings because meditation, on a scientific level, it's a way to tell the ancient brain when you're breathing calmly that everything's okay. Because
Mhm.
the ancient brain, it doesn't listen necessarily to logic.
Yeah, true.
It's the language of the body.
Mhm.
Because So when you're telling your body you're okay by like sitting in stillness or doing some yoga practice, you're telling the lizard brain that like, hey, it's all good. So, you know, that's really important. And I think this is an opportunity for us to see how our brains like go into these scenarios that are not actually present in front of us. Um, and like we could feel like we have the virus already just sitting there watching the news, because your ancient brain doesn't necessarily know the difference. So in that sense, I think um, it's an opportunity, but it's challenging. I mean, it's really challenging for me to, we don't have time to work and we're homeschooling. I know other people have much greater challenges, but I think framing is really important.
Mm.
What I've learned from positive psychology and Buddhism and yoga, you know, so much is how you frame the situation. So if we frame this as an opportunity to grow, expand our comfort zone, an opportunity to meet a challenge and say, I'm going to expand my patience, that instantly shifts from like, oh my God, when is this going to end? I can't handle this anymore. I don't know if I can handle this. How much worse is it going to get? So if anytime you can do that reframing and then go back to like gratitude, I think for me, that's what works, but it's still really challenging. I mean, I'm far from an enlightened sage about it. I have my days where I'm just, I
Yeah.
have my head in my hands. You're like, I don't know. I
Yeah,
don't
true.
know if I can do it.
Yeah, sometimes
Yeah.
it's like it feels like you're really like kind of in as if it's this whole thing is a whole meditation and you are the observer and seeing stuff that's going on in the world and you just can lean back on and watch it. But some days it's also like, oh damn, I'm getting caught by these thoughts of the world, like oh, getting into it again. Like
Yeah.
it's really really strange.
Well, yeah, fear is I mean, what we have to do right now, I think, is separate healthy caution
Mm.
from unnecessary anxiety and fear, and that is where mindfulness practice and yoga and surfing, if you're able to do it, any kind of exercise where you're able to really watch your mind function, is you can say, okay, a healthy caution is, you know, obeying the CDC rules and not, you know, wearing a mask when you're out at the grocery store, trying to protect others. But chances are, even if you get this virus, you're going to be absolutely fine, right?
Totally.
97% chance you're going to be absolutely fine. You'll get through it. Um, so spinning out an anxiety, will I get the virus? Will I get the virus? That's an unnecessary fear. Um, Spinning out an anxiety about how long this will last or what the repercussions will be, nobody knows. So you don't have to worry about that anymore because there's
Mm.
nothing you can do about it. It's out of your
Yeah.
control. And then coming back to, okay, what's a healthy caution? Well, I can, you know, clean my house and spray the items that arrive on my doorstep and do those things without going into this these future scenarios that are not
Mm.
actually present for you. So
True.
um, so I think, but that actually watching how your mind does that, because our minds are flickering so fast and speeding into the future all the time, takes like some practice. So hopefully for the folks who are at home, you know, it's you have some time to actually do a little daily practice and watch how your mind does that, and just keep coming back to the present and coming back to the breath.
Yeah. Do
That's
you
what
have
works
a
for me.
what kind of meditation practice is your most favorite one?
You know, it fluctuates. Right now, I feel like my days are so packed that you know, moving around the house while the kids are screaming is my meditation. But while that's happening, I'm trying to stay anchored in my breath. And I try to do some like mantras or chanting that bring me back to the fact like that even though we're in this isolation, we're all connected.
Mm.
And the sort of, like you say, coming back to the source is always just moving through us, you know, go with the flow of life. So instead of trying to like control the chaos, because inside my house, if I walk in right now, you'll see how chaotic it is.
Hmm.
And if I try to control it and be like, you have to do this, you're off your Zoom call, like, I'm not getting my emails done, like, that's when things spiral for me. But if I'm kind of like, you know what, this is just a situation, I can't control it, I'm going to anchor myself in my breath or my mantra, you know, Om Mani Padme Hum, or whatever it is I'm doing. Um, I notice like the environment, although a little bit more chaotic than I would like it, starts to feel more at peace. But in the evenings when I sit, finally get a chance to sit when everyone's asleep, I'll just do usually some body scans, like
Hmm.
following my breath and then starting at the crown of the head and just moving down. I like to move down sort of almost as if there's like honey trickling over my head and going all the way down to the toes. And I do that
Mm.
really slowly. So I get awareness of each part of the body. And regarding water, it's a really nice meditation because I sort of imagine that I'm going back with each cell by cell to my aqueous state because
Mm.
water is clear and it's relaxed and it's the source of life. And so as I do that, I try to relax into, um, my original nature
Yeah.
in that form of water.
Yeah. Sounds great. Sounds nice.
Uh,
And what I'm interested in, I mean, you're also like a spiritual person, like mindful person. What was it like? But not everybody had the luck to grow up in a family like you did, right? Like a family with a spiritual background already. What was it like growing up in a family like that?
I mean, it wasn't any kind of like unicorns and rainbows. I think that, my parents, I think a lot of people get into spiritual practice because they're in touch with some sort of pain inside
Mm.
themselves from their past or from a relationship. And I think my parents were no exception. They had issues that they were dealing with, um, and so they used and they came in and out of like being dedicated to their meditation practice or whatever. So there would be like a decade when nobody was really doing anything, and then other times where they were really into it. But it was great to be introduced at a young age. I rebelled against it, like any, just like a kid who was raised in the Catholic Church or something,
Hmm.
and said, this
Getting
isn't
read
for
the
me.
Bible each day. What are you
Right.
taught? Right?
So I was like, that's sort of, new agey and weird or something. And then, but then when I ran away from home at 16 and to surf and moved to Maui, and I was suddenly confronted with intense fear, that's when I said, I need to do something. And I really started investigating meditation. And because that seed had been planted, it was sort of like a logical step for me. I
Mm.
think it could have been something else too that would have been helpful, but that was what it was for me. And I think it's really useful.
Mm.
But going back to what we were talking about with the pandemic, when you're really confronted with a hardship or a fear, that's actually an opening. It's because usually we kind of distract ourselves from our pain and with movies and music, and it's like you can keep changing the channel, but
True.
when you're really stuck inside and you have to face yourself, that is a really deep spiritual opportunity, I think, to look at like the fundamental angst of life and like
Mm.
what is the only way out of that is
Yeah.
inside.
Yeah.
Inside, it's like external circumstances will always be problematic. We're always going to get sick. We're always going to be heading toward the grave. We're always going to not have the amount of money that we want. Even if you are a billionaire, you still kind of will have that sense of wanting more. So when you are finally have to confront like, oh, there's a fundamental angst here inside me. How do I deal with it? I think it
Mm.
is an opportunity.
Totally. So, what would you recommend people for who would love to do stuff they actually aren't allowed to do right now, like surfers who are not allowed to go into the water, people who are not allowed to go out to their to do sports or stuff like that? What can they do?
I mean, you got to find a way to work out. That's just like a given. I'm lucky that I can go running on the trails around here. So I've
Mm.
been doing that, going skating in some empty parking lots with the kids and stuff. But if you are really stuck in an apartment in a city, I mean, you just have to force yourself to like put on like a YouTube video, doing some Ashtanga yoga or some like, hip hop dance video and do it every day because
Mhm.
if you it's really you need that on a neurological level. You need the dopamine in your body, you need some adrenaline, otherwise you will get really depressed. If you're
Mm.
just in here clicking if you're just at home clicking through cat videos and then watching the breaking news about it, like more people dying, it's going to get bad for you
Mm.
inside. And And so you know, if you can't surf, your body's used to a certain um, amount of your muscles getting oxygenated and your brain getting oxygenated, and you know, exercise brings happiness for a reason. So you just have to do it. Do whatever you can. You know, yoga, jumping jacks.
Mm.
You know, what are you doing?
I'm totally a freeletics addicted at the moment. I love freeletics, doing it at home, and some yoga practices, but at the moment I'm really totally into freeletics. Just half an hour a day, like it's like kind of a high intensive workout. It's really good. So it's really
I
nice.
actually have found, like, normally I'm just surfing and as my workout,
Mm.
and I've found that because I'm not surfing, I'm doing these things like that, like these high intensity workouts, like that I'm following on YouTube or going for runs and stuff, that I'm actually getting in better shape, which is shocking me. But I
Yeah,
think when we go surf, we don't realize that you're just using the same like shoulder muscles over and over
totally.
again. And so, you know, I guess maybe that's another opportunity, you know, get ripped during the
Yeah,
pandemic.
totally, totally. Yeah. And what for what else are you using the quarantine time right now? So stuff that you couldn't do before. How can you get make use of the time right now, or are you using it for yourself right now?
I mean, for me personally, I have less time because the kids are not in school.
Ah, yes, true.
So I'm just like, we're homeschooling in the chaos every day, and then I'm working at night doing my writing projects. I have one thing I have been doing, if you have kids at home, is I've been trying to do work projects that kind of can assimilate into what they're doing. So I'm just writing a children's book called Mop
Mhm.
Rides the Waves of Life, and it's like a saltwater Buddha for kids.
Mm.
And I'm writing the sequel to that, so that was something where I could draw my pictures while the kids are doing some coloring books and stuff, and we could all work together.
Oh, sweet. Yeah.
But if you're at home, I mean, I mean, you're never gonna, and you don't have kids, and you have more time on your hands. I mean, you use this as an opportunity to go on retreat. I mean, some of my friends are doing that. I have a surfer friend in Malibu, like I said, who is watching the waves and he can't go out. And so he's been doing these free Buddhist retreats with,
Mhm.
you know, Sharon Salzberg and people like this. A lot of great meditation teachers have free online stuff going, and you won't have a time again when you have um, no pressure to be at that party, to be at that
Sure.
meeting, to or maybe to get extra work done out in the world. So use this as an opportunity to finally do that like 7 day meditation retreat or
Yeah.
yoga retreat, and just do it online. I mean, it's a wonderful. I would love to have a chance. So if you don't have kids, take advantage.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah, I also see it like a nice chance to the world is stopping, so you can move forward with the stuff, the project you have, right? It's just using the time, and it's really nice. I like it at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, I think we can learn a little bit from this when the world goes back to normal, that we don't have to do all the shoulds. You know, there
Mm.
are so many shoulds, like you have to show up at this event um, for work, or you have to travel for XYZ. And it's, you know, we're wrecking the planet with all of our carbon emissions doing those shoulds.
Mm.
And I think there are many times when we can just say no, and um, you know, save the air and save our mental sanity. So hopefully the world's learning how to do that, and that we
Yeah.
can, and we're seeing now how we can take a collective pause for the benefit of humankind to save lives. And that's the exact situation we're in with climate, but we're not doing it because
Yeah.
it's not immediate enough. People aren't dying
True.
on the spot, although they are with the fires. So I think that's the other opportunity, is like, this is a roadmap for like
Mm.
what we have to do collectively as humans to bring the world into balance. So
Yeah. What do you think? What's your assumption? Like, are people or humans ready to change, like make it sustainable change, or just think of 1 week after everything is normal again, they also go back as for usual business as usual, as if never anything happened?
I think it'll be both. You know, I
Mm,
think we'll certainly be firing up the coal plants at full blast. You know, as soon as people are able, they will. But I think also there is going to be a huge group of humans who maybe said, I don't know, or haven't been paying attention to the science of sustainability and saying, you know, that's someone else's job to maybe say, oh no, you know, that's kind of what we did with the pandemic. We didn't
mm,
listen to the experts and we let it get out of control too quickly. And so let's try that again. And not that science is perfect. I mean, I have a lot of issues with the dogma of science and how
hmm.
people follow it blindly. But in terms of like health crises, like climate change and sustainability, we need to trust the experts, I think, on those issues. Um, and I'm hopeful that there are a lot of people learning from this.
Mm,
But I also think humans have a really short memory, and we tend to only respond to those immediate threats. It's
yeah.
like that affect us personally. So,
Hmm.
like when the fires are raging at your house, all of a sudden you care about climate change. When your grandmother's dying of coronavirus, all of a sudden you're like, "Don't go out." But
Yeah.
it's so we're just uh, because of our survival instincts, it's not that we're bad. We're
Mm,
trained just to look at what's affecting us. And so, but never before in in history have humans been so connected and responding to the same thing
yeah.
together. So, yeah, I mean, God willing, we'll learn from it.
Hopefully, yeah, would be nice. Cool. And just a moment. Ah, yeah. Yeah, you just mentioned your children book. Can you tell us about it?
Yeah, totally. Thanks for asking. So, uh, you know, having kids, I just wanted to start doing stuff, you know, delivering a similar message to what I've been talking about in my grown up books, All Our Waves Are Water, Saltwater Buddha, to kids. And I realized actually my message in those books is really simple. It can
Hmm.
be distilled down to a children's book. And, you know, everything around us, we're made of particles and waves, waves of energy. Our thoughts move as waves, our emotions move as waves. And so surfing is a really helpful metaphor to describe reality. And for kids, kids are already really in the present moment. They're always playing, so they don't actually need a lot of like coaching to be mindful. But what they do need coaching with is getting seized by huge emotions like anger and jealousy and just reacting quickly. It's like, I'm pissed off, I'm going to push that kid. And and so Mop Rides the Waves of Life, my children's book, is really it's a kid who loves to surf, but he like runs into problems at school, like, you know, getting angry, getting jealous, all these things, and reacting quickly. But then he goes surfing and he feels good. So he finally learns through some recommendation from his mom actually to surf life, like surf his emotions, ride the good waves when they're there, and enhance them with being stoked. Like when you feel joy,
Hmm.
enhance it and celebrate that. But when you feel angry, don't react right away, like duck dive,
Yeah,
relax, do what you do when you get drilled on a big set. If you fight it, you don't end up saving your energy. But if you relax,
true.
pause, the wave passes, and then you swim up and you're okay. So that's a roadmap just for our minds. And so Mop just gives some really cool imagery from artist Matt Allen. He's like a surf artist in Southern California.
Hmm.
Illustrated it really beautifully. So yeah, check it out. Actually, during the pandemic, we have a free version app on YouTube. If you
Oh,
Google
nice.
Mop Rides the Waves of Life, because it's not out until June, but we wanted kids to have a tool to you know help them with their emotions while this is going on. So yeah, Google Mop Rides the Waves of Life on YouTube, and there's an audio book, free audio book up there right now.
Ah, perfect. Nice. When you just mentioned this hold down thing, right? Rather do a duck dive than to go against the energy. In the book Fear, you also wrote like an avalanche of foam moves me down, and I'm back into blackness, punched, kicked, splayed, held under again. I'm gagging for air again with no sense of direction. Where the hell is the surface? It was, I guess, after the second hold down in Mavericks, right?
Yeah, I think
What's
that.
going through the head if you're like this massive wave, like, and just not knowing, oh, come, am I going to come up again?
Yeah, I mean, Mavericks is just a different situation than any other wave I've ever
Mm,
been at. Where I have been able to train myself at big waves I'm familiar with, like Ocean Beach. When
mm,
I get drilled, relax. I know where I am. But Mavericks, I'm not a seasoned Maverick surfer, and that year when I was going out there, I never got comfortable with it. It's such a nuclear, horrific place, and your body and mind know that you might die, and you're right.
mm,
It's a healthy caution. Like, you may, like, even no matter how good you are, you get
mm,
drilled in the wrong way, you might pass out and not come up. And so when I did get held down there, I was not able to relax. There
mm,
was no, um, I just panicked and used up so much energy. And I think, that's just the reality of it. No amount of like meditation and yoga could prepare me for that like primal reaction. I think if I went out there a lot, I might
mm,
get to that point, but um, it's all exposure therapy. That's what I learned in the Fear Project is that you can talk yourself out of fears, you can meditate through some fears, but really the only way to get comfortable with an
mm,
actual scary situation is to expose yourself positively to it. So that's why people in high risk fields, um, like, they have to train and train and train for situations again and again to actually stay calm in the
mm.
moment, because the minute you actually have the gun pointed at you, you
Yes.
know it's, if unless you've seen that 100 times in calm, you're not going to be calm when it's actually
Mm.
happening. And that's the situation at Mavericks, and I never really surfed it enough to ever feel calm out there.
Okay, good.
That's the honest truth.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. And yeah, what I've so you're also doing a lot of stuff, right? You're writing, you're doing documentaries, you're surfing, you're leading retreats, giving workshops, and it's what I also find really fascinating. So because I'm also like a guy who can't concentrate on one passion, one job, And I think
Yeah,
we as a society, we grew up, we learned, oh, you need to do what you need to find your one thing, and that's what you're doing your whole life, your dharma,
yeah.
your whatever. And I found that always super difficult to fit in to like that. So you're kind of similar. So what would you say, tell people, or suggest people who still are caught in these patterns, like, oh damn, I just need to find my one thing, but actually I'm interested in that, and I'm interested in that, and I also want to do this. Is it okay? And
Yeah.
you know
Yeah, I think yeah, I mean, the world wants to put us in boxes and say this person is into yoga, so they believe X, Y, and Z. This person is into surfing, so they're like a shaka dude,
yeah.
like non-intellectual. Or this person is a professor, and so they don't like watching whatever, silly comedies. But that's not how we are, right? We're
Mm,
spherical beings. I have this saying of like living spherically, where you include your whole self. Like,
mm,
we're incredibly rich, complex beings, and to, I think, allow for that in your professional life is a beautiful thing. And um, it's really just about authenticity, right? When you
mhm,
allow for all of your interests to come out, and you're honest about the fact that your life is a big Venn diagram of many interests and curiosities. I think that's how most humans are, but the media and social media often wants to pigeonhole us into one thing, and so I think we just have to resist that as souls, that like we don't the soul does not want to be pigeonholed into like
yeah,
you are only this thing that can be labeled in a 150 word profile.
true.
Um, and but at the same time, you can't do everything, and I think you can
Mm,
make yourself crazy if you're a person who is like uh, drawn to always switching, which I'm
I know
interested
this
in
too.
this, and now I'm getting bored of it. I'm going to do this. I think there's a balance of also finding like seeing things through,
Mm.
finishing things you start. Um, but yeah, I mean, I'm all for it. I think it's a new time period where we see a lot of examples of people who are artists who also have a meditation class that they lead, or it's like the Red Hot Chili Peppers. I was at a concert a couple of years ago, and the next day they were leading a meditation in the park, and like
Oh,
their
sweet.
music isn't necessarily like, you wouldn't necessarily think, oh yeah, those guys are into that, but they are. And
Mm.
it's a way, it's another way that we get in touch with our creativity, and that you can be a person who practices mindfulness or yoga, and also not always be perfectly zen and like to, like, I don't know, rock out to Pantera every now and again or
Yeah,
something,
true.
whatever it is, like, that's okay. um so yeah, I think it's all good. I think it's just a matter of accepting,
Mm.
self-acceptance, and that's really, I don't know what you think, but I think a lot of what the spiritual path is about just accepting yourself as you are, and
Yeah.
not like judging and trying to put yourself, like, every part of your, what is labeling, this is okay, this is not okay, this is like,
Mm.
just being like, this is what is,
True.
this is
True.
what's natural. Yeah. How it does get complicated as sometimes with the work though. How do you um live spherically like that?
How,
How about you? Like, how do you manage to do, you also do a lot of different, um,
yeah.
like different things. Like, how do you manage and categorize?
Yeah. I just try to, I don't know. I mean, oftentimes I work as a copywriter. That's fine for me. But, and then I do these retreats or workshops, and yeah, and then I also like do these surf holidays. But still, for me, I find it to be very important to have these little islands that I can um, take inspiration from that island. I take this inspiration for the other island. Like for example, if I'm doing copywriting, then I can, and I know, oh, this is just for 1 week or 2 weeks now. So in 2 weeks, I'm somewhere else. That's helpful for
Right.
me because I don't
Right.
feel stuck on that island. Because I don't know what it's for you, but for me, it's always like, oh, damn, if I would know I'm doing this for the rest of my life, I would get panicked, like, oh, stuck and caught as a prisoner. So that's always nice for me. So I like these jobs. But if I would do one of these as the only thing in my life, I wouldn't feel comfortable anymore because I need this exchange of disciplines somehow.
Yeah. Yeah. Variety is the spice of life.
Totally, totally. What did you brought to writing?
What did I bring to writing?
No, no. How did you came to writing? Sorry.
Oh, I mean, I kind of stumbled into it. I always liked journaling and stuff as a kid,
Mhm.
and I would write little stories about animals and whatnot. But I never was one of those people who was like, I'm going to be a writer. Um, but I was just kind of exploring, and I wanted to be a marine biologist, and then I wanted to be an artist, and then I wanted to be a philosophy and religion major, and I was
Mm.
just dabbling in all kinds of stuff. And I realized writing, at some point, I realized writing, I could do it all, and
Yeah.
I could, because I think I am, I have a, I'm curious about everything. Everything is interesting to me, and when I started journalism, I realized I could do an investigative piece and I would feel like a detective. I could
Mm.
go write about marine biology and I felt like I was Sylvia Earle. I could put on these different hats. Um, and then gradually I started writing about my own experiences about surfing. And then I got the opportunity to write a book. A publisher contacted me and said, we read this article about how surfing is like a Zen experience for you. Can you make it into a book?
Oh, wow.
And
They came to you. That's cool.
they came to me, and
Nice.
I, at the time, they were kind of wanted it to be like a how to kind of
Mm.
a book, and I said I don't want to do that, but I like telling stories, so maybe I could tell about sort of my stumbling way that I learned surfing and meditation, and that's how Saltwater Buddha started. And when that after that came out, I realized I liked telling stories in the long form. So I've
Mm.
continued doing books.
Nice. Yeah, that's great. That's great. That's cool that they just that they saw an article and then came to you. It's perfect, right? Like more
I never
encouraging.
expected it. Yeah, I never expected to be writing a memoir, when I was 26 or
Mm.
something, but it was just, just stumbled into it and tried to stay open, trying to say
Yeah.
yes to
Yeah. Cool.
opportunities. Yeah.
Nice. Yeah. I just lately I just read that you also read, and at a young age you also read Hesse's Siddhartha, right? I think it's so many.
Yeah.
It's a book that so many people who get into spirituality kind of read this book or should actually. I loved it. It's amazing.
It was one of the books that I ran away with when I went to Maui when I was 16. I left. I was locked in the suburbs, and I literally just took a few of my possessions, like my skateboard, Siddhartha's Herman Hesse, threw it in a bag and went. And so that was the thing I happened to be reading, and it was kind of a random grab. I was just like
Mm.
looking for, it was a gut instinct, but it changed my life for sure. My
Yeah.
um, trajectory. And sorry, I'm outside. There's somebody like mowing their lawn over here. I don't know if it's
Yeah. It's
getting
great.
into the feed so much.
It's so as a writer, what would you recommend if you're sitting of other writers or journalists, people who write or blogs, if they're sitting in front of, the situation for sure also. Like if you're sitting in front of a blank sheet and you actually you want to do write some you want to write something, but then you feel, damn, there's this procrastination style coming up, and I just want to push it away because I feel stuck and I'm not able to start. I have this for 4 days already right now.
Well, if you're doing a book, well, there's multiple answers to that. If you just have writer's block and you need to like write a short story or
Yeah,
something,
it's like an essay.
um, what I do is I just free flow with a pen and paper.
Mm.
Like I'll go up on a hillside and say, no pressure. This isn't what's going to be published, but I'm just going to like scribble it down as fast as I can. And
Hmm.
then oftentimes a lot of thoughts come through, and I can rarely like type that up and have it be, that would be nice if it was then just done. But, but there's something about pen and paper, getting away from your computer and just like letting your hand move. Just keep
Hmm.
the hand moving, because sometimes we get too locked in our thoughts of everything has to be perfect, everything has to make sense. And this is an analogy for like surfing too. Sometimes your movements are like stilted and stuck, and
Hmm.
then you haven't surfed in a while and you're going out to have fun and you just like stick a landing because you're getting out of your own way. So to get into like a place of flow, sometimes you just have to keep moving without the mind. So just say whatever comes out. Um, and sometimes I'll do that with books too. If you're trying to think of like what book you want to write, one exercise that I recommend is, a book takes so much work, and it's going to
Hmm.
be a couple of years of your life probably, if not more. Um, so write the book that you want to write before you die. Like imagine yourself on your deathbed
Oh
and
yeah.
saying like, I'm glad that I wrote one book. And if I
Hmm.
would write one book, it would be this book.
Hmm.
And because a lot of times you think, oh, I'll write this book and that book and this other thing, jumping through hoops to get to the thing that really my heart wants to say. But if you're going to make yourself sit down every day and do something incredibly difficult, which is just like come up with sentences out of the ether,
Yeah.
hours and hours a day, you might as well be doing something that you're really passionate about.
Hmm.
And also that thing that is you feel like is your purpose on this earth to say, whether that's a
Hmm.
song you want to write or a website you want to create, or I often think just go to your deathbed. What's the thing that you want to leave behind, and start on that now.
Hmm.
Even if there are some hoops you have to jump through practically to get to that point, like
Hmm.
even getting the free write started or the brainstorm can kind of begin like a magic spark, I think, that lights the fire.
Yeah. That's amazing. Nice. Nice. Yeah, as Johnny also says. Yeah, great answer. Perfect. And yeah, regarding to that also, it's like society. I mean, I think some people would love to do stuff they actually are passionate about, but they are scared, right? Staying in the comfort zone, not leaving the comfort zone to, I don't know, get into a zone of insecurity, of fear, to do something else. They rather stay in their old job they are unhappy with. So what would you suggest? What could they do?
Um, I mean, I think you can go through. Oftentimes, people are scared. Like, what if this happens?
Mm.
If I leave my job and I don't have enough money, or I can't come back to it if I leave. Um, so what I often say is play out that worst case scenario that could happen, and then say, will you be able to handle that? Like, if that happens, and chances are the answer is yes. It might
Mm-hmm.
suck a little bit, it might hurt, um, but that's the worst case scenario. And then if you can really get yourself into a place where you're like, I can handle that if that happens, and it probably won't. Like, maybe
Mm.
there are a bunch of gradients of possibilities of how it could go not exactly how you hope. But just tell yourself, like, okay, that situation is maybe a 3 on a scale of of negatives that I could handle, but my resilience and strength is like an 8 or a 9 or a 10 or a 20.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, even though it would suck, I can handle it. And
Mm.
just so you first like prepare yourself and recognize the choice that you're willing to make and the risk you're willing to take. Like, if this happens, I can handle it. If it's something you feel like, no, I can't handle that, then you may not be ready to jump ship. Like,
Yeah.
you might need to work more on a gradient. Like, okay, I'm going to keep the job that I don't like, but it's giving me security, and I'm going to take, um, commit to taking gradual steps, baby steps
Mm.
away from it. So maybe that's like setting up a blog, because you can't quit your job right now and spend your time writing your dream novel, but you're going to set up a blog and write, some little short stories like on the side or whatever it is. Like, you're just taking some baby steps. But the other thing I think to investigate is whether whether what you're wanting to leap to is like is a true passion that connects to your core values, or
Mm-hmm.
are you just bored at work?
Mm.
Like,
True.
so I think sometimes this takes a deep dive to go into, like, what do I actually really believe are my talents and gifts and my sort of message that I
Mm.
want to, how I want to impact the
Yeah.
world. And does this thing I want to leap to connect to that enough where there's going to be like a fire burning inside me that gets me through all those times when it's really hard and I'm like, oh shit, why did I jump into this? Like, this is way harder than I expected. Because it's inevitable that that's going to happen,
Mm.
when you're going to say, this is harder than my job I was bored with.
Yeah.
And do you have the fire inside you, that is going to take you through that? And if it's purpose driven and and you really feel like it connects with like your core values and who you are and what you believe needs to be in the world, then you
Mm.
will like. But if it's something where it's just kind of like, I want to be cool and I'm not cool right now, and it's like, is that gonna, or I'm bored and that looks kind of fun, I want to experiment. If it's one of those, then you want to, I think, test the waters. Like, go do an informational interview with the documentary filmmaker who's doing your dream job. Say, hey, can I talk to you about what your life's like? Or, whatever. Do some investigating, um, to see, like, is this really something I want to leave the safety of my current
Mm.
situation to go into? So it's a long-winded answer, but I think it's important, because sometimes you're following like a real, burn in your heart to do something, and other times I think we're just like looking to distract ourselves.
Yeah, true. Yeah, our teacher always says is like, so you take what you got, like your talent, and stuff like. So if you feel stuck into your life and with a job that you don't like, so he's always saying also like stuff like it's actually similar. Saying like you take what you got, like your talent or your passion, and you don't use it for your ego, but you use it for something higher, right? Like you do with the
Yeah.
surfing books. So like with wider message. You use your passion, the surfing and the spirituality, but you use it to share like a higher message that people can use for their lives. So it's stuff like that.
Yeah, it's, and each one of us, I think, I mean, all of that process that got me able to do that, to do something that it looks kind of easy sometimes when you're like, oh, this guy traveled around the world and just meditated and surfed and wrote these books. And but there were many years of struggle where I was like, what the hell am I doing with my life? I'm stuck in a job writing something for a website that I don't want to be doing when I want to be writing this book, and lots of like hemming and hawing and one foot in this world and one foot in the other, and then keeping on coming back to my journal or my quiet time inside myself and saying, what do I really want to leave on this earth, when I depart. And I think that question often gives you the courage to be like, this is meaningful to me. This is not. So I'm going to finish this project for the website I don't care about. And then I'm not going to take on another one because it didn't feel right to me. It didn't feel aligned with like what I really care about.
Yeah, true. Here's a question. In your book, Saltwater Buddha, you wrote that the ocean is your biggest teacher. What else is your teacher in terms of spirituality, but also life? Who else inspires you?
Yeah, good question. I mean, a lot of people, I think I am one of those people who I get inspired by others, but ultimately I try to trust my inner teacher. And I think while doing like sometimes those free writes to myself is so important, and why I like the ocean, because I get a chance to be quiet and with myself. And then, but seeing others who are living authentically and living their truths really inspires me as well. I think we were talking earlier about people who aren't afraid to unbox themselves, to be totally themselves in public. And I'm always inspired by that, because I think it takes a lot of courage to really show sort of the prism of your own heart to the world. But as far as like teachers go, I've had a really wonderful teacher for years and years called Stephen Tainer, who who's in Berkeley, California, and I still do retreats with him. And so I recommend checking out some of his books. Like he has a book called Dragon's Play. He's a mix of sort of Taoism.
Dragon's Play?
Dragon's Play.
Dragon's Play. Okay.
He's a mix of like Taoism and Buddhism. And then also, in All Our Waves Are Water, I talk about some of my teachers like Baba Haryadas and a Tibetan monk that I'm dear friends with named Sonam. So I've had so many great teachers, Thich Nhat Hanh, Robert Thurman is one of my teachers at graduate school, but then continues to be a meditation teacher of mine. I highly recommend his podcast, the Bob Thurman podcast. So I'm fortunate to be kind of have many teachers.
What's the podcast called again?
Bob Thurman
Bob Thurman. Oh, it's just the name. Okay.
Yeah.
Nice. Okay, cool. Check it out. Cool. Another question I wanted to ask you. Before you write a book, is it, do you think just about what you want to bring out, or do you think also in terms of how will the audience like it, or doesn't it influence you also, when you judge your writing?
Yeah, it's a balance. I mean, ultimately, I think you're writing for yourself. So you want to, there's a process that you're interested in having of like figuring out your life, figuring out reality. So you're writing, and figuring out what you think, because sometimes you don't know what you think until you write it. But then there's also these sort of story formulas that are helpful. It's like stories have a beginning, middle, and end, and you don't want people to be bored or people to tune out. You want your message to get across in a way that is enjoyable.
Yeah.
So, and that's more of like, those are kind of two separate things. Like you have to figuring out in your sort of free writes and stuff what you want to say, and then figuring out how that fits into a digestible story that's like enjoyable. Um, and so absolutely, I mean, I think about like what is the, you know, ending my chapters sometimes with a cliffhanger, so you want to go to the next one, or
Mm-hmm.
ending it with a you know, those are just all, that's more like the craft of writing, that is a separate craft in some ways than and it really just comes through a lot of reading of other great writers. So I
Mm-hmm.
always say, when I sometimes teach a memoir class or other writing classes, and I say, figure out your container for your book. And what that often means is, um, like, are you going to write about a year of your life? Are you going to write about a decade of your life? Are you going to write about a week-long trip you took? Figure out your container. Then find somebody out there who did that really well, who
Mm-hmm.
has like maybe the tone that you're looking for, and or somebody who has sort of the style of, or the narrative arc that you're looking for, and then and read that really well. So when you get lost, you come back and say, this is my container, and I'm kind of using this as a guiding light. I'm not
Mm-hmm.
copying it, but it's like, it's so easy to get lost. There are a million choices. Every sentence there's a choice. What's your
Yeah.
next sentence going to be?
True.
Every chapter there's a choice. What's your next chapter going to be?
Also bad for
uh,
people who are who it's hard for making decisions.
exactly, exactly. So you need some inspiration. So I say, get like a tone inspiration, a writer who you really love, the way their sentences just roll off the tongue. And then
Mm-hmm.
another one who's like, maybe, oh, this is a writer who took a year of their life and they traveled all around Indonesia and they turned it into a book. Like, that's what I'm doing. And then you use those as guideposts. But then in terms of what you want to say, you have to then get out of the judging mind and say, I'm not going to worry what people are going to think of this, because I'm going
Yeah.
to take risks and I'm going to say exactly what's in my heart.
Mm-hmm.
How you craft that message is a different thing, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, nice, cool. And so, who's your ideal when you were talking about you watch out for people who did something similar you want to go for? Who was that for you?
Oh, let me think about that. Well, there are a couple like prose writers who I've always been like huge fans of their prose. There's a writer named Michael Ondaatje who's won like the National Book Award a bunch of times, and he's just an incredible writer. Or another South African writer named Coetzee,
Oh
who
yeah,
J.M. Coetzee,
yeah,
who wrote
yeah. He's
Shame.
great.
Like, I can pick those up and just read a few sentences and be like, oh my gosh, that's so crisp and so
Mm-hmm.
clear. And it just, the tone gets into your own voice, where you can say, I'm not gonna, I have a different language than them, but they're so economical with
Mm-hmm.
their words, that, and that inspires me to really edit, um, and um, and to not be repetitive and stuff like that. There are some plot, you know, books. I'm also like a big fantasy reader. I love like fantasy novels. So, you know, like Lord of the Rings, Harry Potter,
Mm-hmm.
all those kinds of books. I love them because they're the hero's journey.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, but they also are just a lot of fun. So I, I'm often reading one of those books, I think, to keep my writing like having a fun journey that you're
Mm-hmm.
on, where there's really like something that, uh, and you're investing in these characters as and their inner challenges.
Yeah. Okay, nice, cool. Okay, so my very last question is, and that's a question I ask everyone. What does the ocean mean to you?
The first word that comes to mind is just life. I mean, it's the source of all life, and so it is what we are. you know, and I often think of us as just part of the ocean that's walking on land. You know, our blood is basically the consistency of seawater. We cry saltwater, and so that is what we are. And when we are able to return to it actually physically, it's sort of like going back to mama. You know, that's getting to spend time with family.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm just so grateful to have been raised with a reverence for it and still able to get out in it. I miss her right now.
Yeah. I think a lot of people do it right now, right? You're missing
But
her.
hopefully she's getting a chance to heal, you know. That's
True.
you know, there's a lot less carbon being absorbed right now, and so hopefully this is a healing time.
Hopefully. Let's pray for it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Jamal, thank you so much for that nice
Th-
talk. It was such an honor to talk to you.
Thank you. Likewise. Yeah, I love what you're doing. So
So
keep
do
up
I.
the good work.
Thank you. And
All
talk
right.
to you soon for sure, huh?
Stay in
And
touch. Stay well.
let me know as soon as the children's book is coming out.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I will. It comes out June 30th, the first one, but you can pre-order it. You know, anywhere books are sold. Support your bookstores right now, I think
Yeah.
is a great thing to do. Like call up your local bookstore and pre-order it, because then they don't have to stop. They don't have to come. You don't have to go into the store right now, but you can pre-order it, and then they'll, you know, usually send it to you. But it's certainly available online and stuff too. And like I said, on YouTube. So
Perfect. Okay. Thank
all
you
right,
so much. Have a great day, right?
you too.
Happy
All right,
Easter.
bye. You
Bye.
too.
Bye.